Hi guys, today's video is just something that struck me recently. I'm going to start off with a really sweeping statement. Chronic pain TV is boring. Now as you know, I am a complete healthcare TV obsessive. I love healthcare drama, I love healthcare reality shows. In the UK at the moment we've got some brilliant documentaries on about junior doctors, your life in their hands on BBC Three. On More 4 we've just had a series called The Confessions of a Nurse that has been real insight. Even though I work in a hospital, you see a lot of stuff and those kind of shows that you don't see on your average wards, because sometimes you actually have nice patients. And I really do love healthcare shows, which is why I got really excited with Nurse Jackie when that was first shown over here. Now, the blurb of Nurse Jackie Series 1 was a nurse suffering with chronic pain trying to do her job, and the main gist of it is that she is very good at what she does. But because of the American healthcare system, she was not managing her chronic pain in a conventional way. So that's a series that I started watching. I've always been a massive fan of ER. I remember the first night I watched it, I watched Series 7, and I watched the one with the train crash in that causes Elizabeth Corday to go into premature labour. I remember that. It's called Crossroads. I remember it vividly, and I was addicted to ER ever since. I've got them all on DVD. And obviously starting at Series 7 and watching it right the way through to the end, and then kind of in between, starting at the beginning and going up to the middle, I knew that one of the most talked about storylines was Lucy and Carter getting stabbed in Series 6. Now, this turned into a really interesting story about Dr. Carter battling with the guilt of Lucy's death and dealing with his chronic pain from his renal lack that he had from being stabbed, and it turned into a drug addiction story, which was fine. It was brilliantly acted, brilliant solution, and they've touched on it through the rest of the series to the right kind of level, that it hasn't completely defined his character, but it obviously plays a big part as to who he is, and is a real defining feature in his relationship with Abby as an alcoholic, and what they do as they're both addicts. House is another series that kind of started off as a really different tropical diseases physician with a real specialism, a really different kind of show that you saw, not your everyday medicine, with the main character having a chronic pain issue. Now, he's supposed to have had some sort of rhabdomyolysis, some sort of myopathy, muscle death, that's left him with a very painful thigh. And again, the first 2 or 3 series, you have a man dealing with chronic pain. Now, you know that he's not taking his meds as they've been prescribed, and you know from, I think it's the middle of the 2nd series, when he has Cutty give him an intramuscular dose of morphine when he's particularly bad. You can see that he's not managing his pain well. But as the series go on, again, it becomes a drug-seeking story. And finally, the next show that I wanted to kind of touch on was Make It or Break It. Now, I absolutely adore this show, and as soon as it started on Sunday afternoons in the UK, we were about 1.5 series behind the US. It's about a team of gymnasts who are working their way towards 2012, and everything that they go through, all of their local competitions, their national competitions. It is a drama, but it is a completely feasible, realistic drama. And the story that finished kind of the first half of the first season was Payson Keeler, the previous national champion, breaking her back. And she had a inoperable sacroiliac fracture that she was told would prevent her from ever doing gymnastics again. And throughout the second half of the first series, you find that she has found a new surgeon who's prepared to do surgery on her, and then throughout the second series she's working her way back up to health. Now again, the only way they seem to be able to keep Payson Keeler's character in the show was by making sure that she came back as a gymnast. Now, anyone that's had spinal surgery knows that it's a very, very slow process, knows that it's really, really rare to finish a course of therapy, whether it be surgery and physio, or surgery, or even just coming back from a back injury. It's a long process, and it's very rare that you end up with no pain at all afterwards. But obviously, with her pain, it was a real holdback on the story of her success and her journey. So, fair enough, she was out of action for, must have been half a series. So, what I'm trying to say is, when chronic pain is touched on in TV drama, it always seems to be part of a short-term storyline. And even if you set off a complete drama, the chronic pain element seems to fade into the background as it's taken over by more exciting storylines. And in the case of Nurse Jackie and ER and House, the more exciting storyline seems to be a story about drug addiction. Now, none of these shows are about pharmacists. I'm not bitter about that. No, honestly, I don't give a toss. But the implications for doctors with drug problems are very different to the implications of pharmacists with drug problems. Pharmacists can get hold of meds without prescriptions, and the issue with doctors is incorrect prescribing, which is a completely different violation of terms. It doesn't count as stealing, it's inappropriate prescribing. Although, of course, in ER, Dr. Carter is caught stealing remains of other people's doses of fentanyl in the crash room. So I see that don't get me wrong, I completely adore all these shows, and I'm going to continue watching these shows because I love them, and I'm really gutted that we've lost ER, but I do think it ended at a really good time. I think they brought it together at the end really well, and I was particularly thrilled that the one character who is perceived as dealing with chronic pain, though again she was cured and seems to have no repercussions of her previous disability, Kerry Weaver never had any issues with drug use. And I think she's possibly the only example there is of a bit of a boring storyline of the day-to-day limitations of being a disabled person. I know some people have an issue with disabled person, so please, let that go and change it for whatever you want to call it. I hate the term limited or physically limited, and people who try to make it sound politically correct and it makes it sound worse. That's more of an issue I have with them, rather than use of just straightforward the word disability. It's just something to think about. Is chronic pain really so boring you can't just write it into a character? If any of you haven't watched it, there is a really interesting video that Jennifer Gray has done on chronic pain. Hopefully I will put the link to that below. It's just a really interesting different take, and a day-to-day account really of what her life was like when she was dealing with chronic pain before she found her ways of managing it. Chronic pain in the news this week, we've had George Clooney come out and say that he suffers from loneliness and chronic pain. Heart FM London, one of our radio stations, was particularly scathing of his confession of loneliness, especially when he commented on the fact that his girlfriend was currently staying in one of his 4 different properties. He kind of walked into that one, didn't he? Obviously money doesn't buy you happiness, and that's evident from Whitney Houston dying last week and everyone else who's died in similar circumstances. Money doesn't make you happy. You still have problems like everyone else, and if anything, money gives you the facilities to do more damage to yourself. That's off the point. But chronic pain in the news, we don't know the circumstances completely of Whitney's death, and George Clooney's lonely and lives with chronic pain, so we never know the whole story. But no one is given an opportunity to be made to understand in drama media, and I don't think it's a boring subject, and having another dimension to a person, like in series 13 of ER, where Kerry Weaver's pain is out of control and you can see that she's living with chronic pain. I think that's one of the most character defining series for her. The fact that she tries so desperately to hide the pain she's in from everybody, and then you catch really beautiful shots of her out of everyone else's eye line, crying, and I don't know, I think Out on a Limb, which is what, series 13 episode 11 or 16, I'm a loser, I know that, you don't need to tell me that. That rang so true with me that I do watch that episode regularly if I'm having a particularly bad day, and she really does encourage me to carry on. Just something to think about. Are we being fairly perceived when people do bother to put in storylines about people who are physically challenged? I hate that term. Anyway guys, I will speak to you soon.